So tonight's focus is going to be on animal-assisted interventions. It's a little bit of a personal favorite of mine. So tonight we have joining Kristin, who is from Gateway Horseworks, and then we have Jessica, who is going to be sharing her experience with the canine side of animal-assisted interventions. So what I'm going to do is let Kristin kind of share her professional experience and what she does at her current role, and then we'll pass it along to Jessica, and we'll just open the floor to general conversation. And I think a lot of us lean more towards canines because it's readily available, but I know equines always get a lot of good questions and interest because it's something that we don't all have access to. So with that, I will let Kristin take it away.
Thanks, Augusta, and thank you all for letting me crash your party. Yes, I'm Kristin de Marco. I'm the executive director at Gateway Horseworks, which is a nonprofit that incorporates horses for the mental health treatment of people. I was introduced to veterinary social work as a profession by Dr. Paige Buck, who I have had the privilege of working with and publishing with, you know, really got to meet Aviva Vincent through, you know, I can't even do the acronym without writing it down. IAVSW. Did I get it?
Very good. Yeah.
Sponsored a CE that we did a panel discussion of introducing, you know, incorporating horses for mental health treatment of people, as well as screening a documentary that was filmed about us and a panel discussion afterwards. So we're really grateful for all of your support that you've offered us and allowing us to share more about our work that we do. So Gateway Horseworks is located in suburban Philadelphia. We're about 40 minutes west of the city. And we work with individuals and families here at the farm who are coming with a broad range of mental health issues like depression, anxiety, eating disorders, addiction, PTSD, sexual trauma, and grief and bereavement. And then we also run a number of community-based programs which are free to participants. So we run a program on site at our local prison where we transport our horses into the prison every week, and we see folks who are in the work release center. And then we work with justice-involved youth and children and youth and family services from several counties, as well as parents and caregivers here. We work with veterans from kind of 3 different VA medical centers here under a federal grant. We partner with local inpatient drug and alcohol recovery centers. We work with a local hospice. I know, Amanda, you had said that you're running a bereavement group. We work with kids and families in bereavement, and we're in the 2nd year of a pilot program for kids receiving emotional support in the school district of Philadelphia. So we kind of joke that we work with all the people, but it's all connected through trauma. And what's really exciting about this field of practice is that even though it's relatively new, that it is in high demand now more than ever, especially coming out of COVID. And, you know, the problem is that the practice is outpacing the research. So, you know, we need more, you know, some larger scale studies, meta-analysis to be able to understand more about this field of practice, like what the dose is, who does it work best for, when does it not work, you know, and so on and so forth, so that insurance companies will reimburse for this at a meaningful rate. And then, Augusta, you mentioned access, which is our core value, that really making this work, because we know innovative mental health as well as horses is still very much an elite experience. So we work within the EGALA model right now. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. So we don't do any riding. There's no horsemanship in our programs. We work with the herd out in the pasture where the horses get to be themselves. And so, yeah, I'll kind of stop babbling on there. Hopefully that gives you a good enough snapshot of who we are and what we do.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Jessica, you want to share kind of your experience and what you focus on with your work?
Sure. So Augusta said, I currently serve on the board for the ethics groups, and I'm the director of ethics and standards of practice. So that is kind of the area in which I'm kind of dabbling in veterinary social work. But Gander, I have him as my own personal dog, and my experience so far has been working with him, trying to train him and get him certified for therapy work. I do clinical work part-time, very, very part-time right now with children with autism and other special needs. Currently, it's all telehealth. So due to COVID, it really limited my ability to bring Gander in and use him in therapy, but it has allowed for me to be a little bit more creative and learn how to use animals virtually and in a different way. So that's one thing that I can share with you about how I do that. As far as my experience with Gander specifically, it's been a lot of learning how to go about training my own therapy animal and what my goals are, what I want to use him for specifically. So if we open it up to questions, if you have any questions as far as what that training has looked like for me and different ways in which you can use a canine partner for therapy, that would be one of those things that I'm kind of learning. As far as the virtual telehealth piece of it, I have gotten creative with clients, generally the younger kiddos, when we're teaching emotion skills and understanding body signals. I've started utilizing animals for my kiddos that are really interested in animals that can't recognize body signals of themselves or others. And we start looking at animals and the signals that they give to convey emotions in certain ways. So obviously animals convey emotions differently than us, but I found that it's helped the children connect those pieces that they're missing as far as not recognizing facial features and those body signals. So just different ways to be creative with that has been very interesting.
No. I love like the virtual component too, because I feel like, again, going back to the accessibility, like it's much more readily available. If they have a fear of animals, like that's one way to kind of bridge that gap. So yeah, I think it's really interesting. Kristin, during COVID, did you guys do anything virtually? Because I know Aviva kind of went through those growing pains as well with her program of how do we do this virtually?
Yeah, that was definitely a growing pain, wasn't it? For in so many ways. But yes, so we were only actually shut down till June of 2020, but from March to June, we had a tripod in the pasture. We were live streaming our horses. We ran groups. We worked with folks inpatient. We worked with kids in juvenile detention. And in a way, it did create like a faster access. But there were still barriers because, you know, it's really hard to film, or if your signal isn't great, or trying to keep people engaged, where it's so easy to keep people engaged for a 90-minute session with a group here at the farm. But even getting to an hour felt challenging and made us stretch in different ways. And so one of our colleagues created these cards that have pictures of horses on them, and they're called horse cards, and they're from Israel, and they were here visiting the States for a conference, and we're out in the salt flats in Utah, and she took all these pictures of the wild horses and created like a deck of 100 or 200 pictures, all different pictures of horses with no words on them. And so we got a virtual component of that, and we're able to do different experiential activities, where the horses still become metaphors for the clients, and different questions, and picking different cards and seeing different images and relating them. So, but it was challenging for sure. I'm so glad we're not back. Personally.
Yeah. Yes. Do you want to share a little bit about the Igala model? Because I know when Aviva and I teach our portion of AI, we focus on Igala and Path. So do you want to share a little bit about Igala and kind of what makes that different?
Sure. So IAVSW stands for the Equine Assisted Growth and Learning Association. It was founded by a badass social worker back in 1999. It was really different than a lot of modalities incorporating horses because there wasn't any riding. So it's always focused on the ground. And that really allowed a lot less instruction or no instruction from anyone. So the horses could be themselves and the client could be themselves, and they were meeting on the same footing, eye to eye. And so it made the focus go straight toward the relationship, and different topics can emerge like boundaries and trust and respect quite easily. And it's also always a team approach. So there's always a licensed mental health practitioner and an equine specialist in every session. And so when I was researching about, horses working in mental health, I think what stood out to me about IAVSW was really that the equine specialist had to have 6,000 hours of documented horse experience. They had to have 100 of those hours within the last 2 years, and 40 of those, 100 of those hours had to be on things like horse psychology and groundwork. And then 40 of those hours had to be within the last 2 years. And then we had to recertify every 2 years in the model. And then, it was solution oriented, meaning that clients had their own solutions when given the space to discover them. And so it felt really client centered, and it felt like, that we were all on the same level as well as our clients, that it wasn't holding power over, horses or clients, that it was really something that was happening together. And then we were bound by a code of ethics, not just by IAVSW's code of ethics, but by the licensed mental health practitioners code of ethics, as well as the American Horse Council. And how we treat and care for our horses. So those are kind of the main tenets of the model. And then facilitating it is really an art that continues to evolve in how we offer activities with horses, or how we ask questions, or how we move through different, challenges or obstacles, or how we create a therapeutic space with the horses and our clients. That all is really, I classify in like an art form. And the 4 tenets are kind of the model.
Thank you. I'll open up the floor to anybody else, but I know I have one question. If anybody else has anything, I'm kind of speaking for one member that couldn't join us, but I know she had an interest in the prison system. So if anyone else has other questions or thoughts.
I think one of the questions we get all the time is, it made me think, Jessica, about, ethics is like, how do we make sure that our horses don't burn out? Which is a really important question for all of us who incorporate animals in any way into working with people. And so one of the ways that we do that is that that's kind of unique to a lot of other facilities or nonprofits, is that we have a lot of volunteers that volunteer on the farm. But when the horses are not working, there are no volunteers that ever handle our horses. They are handled by professional equine specialists. And I've gotten a lot of flack for that over the years, But I think for me that I want the horses to be cared for when they're not working. And that we're really mindful of any horse health issues because of that. Like we do all the stall cleaning. We don't have a cleaning crew. We handle all of our horses. And that way, all the nuanced care, if they're not okay, we know it first. And we're pulling them out of work. You know, for example, we've had a pony that just had her second colic surgery. I don't recommend it going through that twice. But so she's been out of work for 6 months and that's okay. You know, like our commitment to them is for life. And if they're not okay, we're not okay, you know? So, we have another horse that really hates hot weather. So she'll be coming up on her little break. And I'm like, as a middle-aged woman, girl, I feel you. So, you know, it's really important to us, the ethical care and well-being of our horses and partnering really closely with our veterinary team to monitor them and make sure that they're really healthy and happy.
I would definitely agree that that's really relevant to the canine world as well. And one of the things that I've encountered having Gander as a personal animal is that opens up a whole nother level of ethics, because if you're using the animal in a session with a client, where your allegiances lie as far as, are you protecting your animal? Are you protecting your client? Are you both? And it kind of creates that tug of war. So it's really opened up my eyes, and may be one of the things why I haven't fully committed him to doing therapy yet, just kind of working through those things. But then also with it being a personal animal, you have to decide when you retire the canine, how to incorporate a new canine. So it does get clouded when your personal attachments are involved as well. And I'm sure that there's still those issues when it's like facility dogs and things like that. The well-being is very important, but I will say having a personal canine, it adds to that difficulty. Yeah. And that's one of the things I think we're hoping to, as an association, to kind of work towards, is developing those ethical guidelines to help groups like yours, Kristin, and kind of be a basis of, here's a standard for what the ethical guidelines should be and what we should be looking at as veterinary social workers and as professionals working in the field in general. So that's a really good point.
Yeah. Well, I know, Kristin, I'll pinpoint, or Krista, I'll pinpoint you a little bit too, because you and Jessica both have your own dogs that you're kind of utilizing. Do you have signs that you look for or know that, okay, this is the time where I need to take a break or they need to take a break, of like working them a little too hard?
Yeah, I think on my side, it's probably a little bit different because I've had the experience with an adult fully certified therapy dog. And then my current therapy dog in training is 11 months old. So we are a very large baby at this point. And to Jessica's point, it is really hard. One of the things that I decided when I opened my own practice is I went on record as being very clear. The dog comes first. Because I wanted my clients to be very clear that dogs' needs had to come first. And so with Wyatt, my adult dog, that wasn't really ever a significant conflict. It might mean that he could move away from an intervention if he didn't want to participate. With the puppy, that has meant I pause sessions regularly to put him in a crate so that he is safe and taken care of, so that I can then pause and come back and be a clinical social worker. And so I do think the ethical applications of that are tremendously important. And I can't say that the decision that I made should be the baseline decision. Just, I can't ethically be an animal assisted therapist without caring for the animal who doesn't have the ability to self-care in a situation like that. And so that's kind of been my experience with that piece of it, but I bet Jessica has a completely different experience in a different environment. Telehealth makes a whole other level of complexity.
Yeah, the telehealth makes it a little bit easier to utilize Gander within the sessions because I can blur out my background when I don't want the client to have access to visibly see him or don't want him incorporating. Because the point that you made too, Krista, is one that I struggled with, is if I'm in a session with a client and I have my animal there, I feel for me personally, it would be very difficult to be the clinician and be the animal handler. For that reason is because your attention is divided between your client and your animal. And so setting apart that role was difficult for me, and I haven't quite found where I feel most comfortable with that yet. Plus, Gander, I haven't taken the formal test for therapy for him. Technically, to work with me, he doesn't need to be formally supervised at the moment. That's our plan. But I do still watch for cues and things for him when he just can't handle it. Sometimes a screen is weird for dogs, so he can't interact the same way. Or when we're out doing practice and we go to stores and we're trying to do just some practice that way, I'm definitely watching those cues and trying to see when it's too much for him as well. So I think it's very important to be mindful of that. But I do find that being the animal handler and having to have my full attention on him, it makes it hard sometimes to work between both. So that's just something I think we need to continue to think about and discuss in terms of ethics and standards is how do we attend to the needs of the animal and be a good clinician at the same time? And there might not be a one size fits all, but definitely brings up some good discussion.
For sure.
Yeah, and that has to be hard, being in both roles. I mean, I feel really grateful that I get to stand next to a licensed clinician, and we, on a good treatment team, like our roles can weave, right? But if there's a situation with the horses, my whole focus can be on the horses and her whole focus can be on the clients. And we can problem solve, like, okay, there's an injured horse. We had a situation where a horse got stung by a bee and galloped through a gate and ripped its whole shoulder open. I mean, it was just like a freak thing. So she could, I just kind of calmly said, we need to move out of the pasture while I go check in on Willow, our horse. And so she could go and like stand there and keep observing and processing and be the clinician. And I could go handle the situation and, apply first aid and call the vet for my horse. So I don't know if that's even feasible in a dog situation, in a dog facilitated session, but I sure am grateful that I don't have to be in that situation, Jessica, and try and figure that out. I'm very glad to be in my role.
Definitely pros and cons. I mean, we talk about that too of, okay, partnering with somebody that has a therapy dog while we're the clinicians. And then we get into, well, you have another body in the room, you get into the HIPAA, very similar to what you do, Kristin, of like having to sign all these paperworks and the level of people being comfortable with having another person in the room. So everything has pros and cons for sure. I think one thing that I was interested, Kristin, when you were talking about doing work in the detention center, what does that look like with horses? Do you take them to the detention center? Do they come to you? What?
No, we started out with working with women. It's been a long day. Women in post-release. And in that first group, we saw that actually asking women who were coming back from prison who are stepping right back into caregivers. Most didn't have licenses. They're mandated to go back and get jobs, that are coming to and trying to get transportation to a farm is really challenging, that we were actually creating more harm than good. So we paused the program and really worked with the prison to say, hey, like, this is not working. Probation was working with us. And so for a while, the residents were coming from the prison to the farm. But they were really struggling with, staffing at the prison. So, I had always been kind of scheming, like, there is so much land here. So we, after several years and measuring outcomes, it was then approved that we had to fund it, but we had to put post and rail up at the facility. So we fenced 2 acres. It looks like one big pasture, but then there is a smaller pasture that in case we had an injury or we need to separate horses, or just good to have 2 spaces, and we have a run-in shelter there for weather, access to water, that we're able to take 2 of our horses on our trailer. It's about 35 minutes, and they're traveling pros. It's their favorite day of the week. They literally drag us onto the trailer, mostly because there's like really good grass that hasn't been touched for a week. And they're completely relaxed. We spent about a month taking them there and back without interacting with any clients and getting them used to the space. So they were, by the time other people showed up, it was like old hat. They were really happy to just go there and back, go there and back. And then, our team is there. We serve a meal at those sessions and to our clients. And then we also, each participant now gets an attendance stipend. And then they get a completion bonus for completing the 6-week program. And the results have been really compelling. So after 5 years, well, according to the U.S. Justice 2018 report, after 6 years, 79% of people returned to prison. And in our program, only 8% returned after 5 years. So we don't yet really, we can guess about like what's happening in that black box, right? About what's changing. And I can tell you anecdotally what I think is working, but it's really needs more research and study about like, clearly something is changing. But it's really interesting and compelling program to the point where I got laughed out of every room I ever walked into. And now we're under a 2-year county contract that the county is paying for this program because of the significant outcomes that it's having.
Awesome. Good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the research is really important. Do you guys partner with the local university to do your research? How do you guys go about that?
We have partnered with Dr. Buck in the past to do some research, and we're nothing we can publicize yet, but we're pursuing a major research opportunity currently.
That's awesome. Yeah, because Dr. Buck also does prison work with canines too. Yes, so very exciting. Nice.
Yeah, we have, I think that she was doing some research on New Leash on Life in Philadelphia. Yeah.
Any other questions? I know we have 2 new people, so I won't put them on the spot because I know they might be driving or something, but anybody else have any questions, insights? I always like the Gala model. It's always really interesting. And I think it goes back to like that interdisciplinary work too, like at the heart, that's what it is. And that's what VSW is. So it's really nice to see that partnership play out.
Yeah, and this partnership has, we've been obviously, aware of veterinary social work, and there are several practices in our area that have veterinary social workers, which is really exciting. And we're all following, all of us who have horses or dogs or cats are really following how many suicides there are in the profession of veterinary work in general. And so it has us thinking more deeply about how do we lend our expertise in working with trauma and mental health and create a program for veterinarians and their staff. So we're kind of rough drafting that right now. And if you guys have any really great insights, but we kind of thought about trying to get funding so that we could provide free staff retreat days here at the farm that would be facilitated for their teams and staff wellness. And more about animals caring for them.
Yeah. And you guys are located out of Philadelphia, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I know Eric Goldman, who's actually located at Tufts University in Massachusetts.
Mhm.
He is the VSW in the school, and I think it's fourth year DVMs go through a rotation, and he utilizes horses. It's pretty much the Agala model, because it's all groundwork, but he does a lot of boundary settings. How do you communicate effectively to the horse that could be a client? How do you work with limited resources? So I'm definitely to put you guys in contact.
That'd be great.
He's a really good one.
Yeah.
And I know.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm just like going off on a mental tangent too. Yeah, so there's definitely some connections that we can put you in contact with. Yeah.
Yeah, great. I'm just looking at the chat.
Yeah,
Is that for me?
I think
Or is that
it
for
is Sadie for everyone for presenters or part of the country. So for veterinary social work, we're international, so we're heavily populated in the United States, Canada. We have a few members and connections in the UK. We also have some in Nigeria and Australia. You do not have to have a license in veterinary social work. So right now it's a certification that is through the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. There are 3 new colleges that are coming online this fall that will also offer the program as well, which are University of North Carolina, Wilmington, Ohio State, and there's one other, which I believe is in Pennsylvania, but I'm not sure which one. And so it's a certification that you will take either your master's level. So I did it when I was earning my master's in social work, and I did it my second year. Or you can also do it postgraduate after you've earned your license or your master's. You don't have to have it to be a veterinary social worker. That was something that we kind of try to grapple with. If we want it to be, you have to have the certification, but really we've had people that have been in this field for longer than it's been around doing this work, and they are veterinary social workers without the certification, so we're not going to take that away from them. So you don't have to do it, but so mental health counselor, social worker, psychologist, psychiatrist, and then there's also the human support certificate program. So if you're an animal professional, so technician, veterinarian, shelter worker, and you've been in the field for 5 years, I want to say, maybe, you can also get the certification that will build your skills in the human aspect of mental health. I think, yes. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, and Natalie's doing, yeah. Sometimes you can do, she doesn't go to University of Tennessee, but you can still do it while you're getting the program. Answers your question. Nice. Yeah, yeah. So look into the human support. Yes, human support coordinator certification, I believe is what it is. So, yeah, there's a lot of great stuff out there. Kristin, we are going to show. Do you want to talk a little bit about the CE? Because I don't think I was not able to attend, but if you want to kind of give an overview of the CE, because we are going to have another showing of that this summer too. So want to share a little bit about that.
You're gonna be sick of me. Y'all are gonna be sick of me. So basically, I think that we're gonna try and replicate the CE that we did at Westchester University. That will do kind of an introduction to incorporating horses in mental health treatment, overview of EGALA and why horses are well suited to working in mental health. Then we'll show the documentary film that was done about us, and then maybe a panel discussion afterwards. Does that sound right, Augusta?
Yeah. Yeah. So that will actually, it's going to be race approved. So that'll be exciting for all of our animal care professional teams. They can get CEs, which will be nice for you, Sadie, as well. Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, so we're going to do that. And we're also going, like I was telling Krista before you guys join, to do the chat with me. You guys get a little sneak peek. So we are going to launch our first CE event. It's going to be on May 9th. Angie, who was previously our secretary, is going to be our first speaker. So she'll be sharing her CE, which is about well-being and trauma and belonging within the veterinary field. So that will be race approved as well. So it's really exciting. We're getting kicked off for our CE events with the association. So very excited. And then I'll also do a little drop. Amanda is going to be joining the board of directors for the association as our student board member. So she just got elected for that. So excited to join. So yeah, we're growing. We got a lot of cool stuff. We're going to be working with Kristin again. We just partnered with NAMV, so our partnerships are growing, and we're doing a lot of really awesome things. So flying by. You guys have any other thoughts, comments, questions about animal-assisted interventions?
So it may be an elementary question for you, Kristin, but my experience with horses is almost next to none. I was born and raised in New York. I moved recently, so I didn't see a horse closer than like 300 feet until I moved to South Carolina, and they're much bigger than I expected, and they make me a little nervous. But you said your location is suburban Pennsylvania. How do the horses, I guess they're okay with that type of environment? I don't know why I always think of rural when I think of horse. And forgive my my ignorance.
Okay. No, I think you make a good point. Like most of our clients have never seen a horse in person. They've only seen pictures of them in books. So it's really exciting, and I love working with people who are quite scared and nervous of horses, and we don't mandate that they go into the pasture and put their hands on them, because we can be on the other side of the fence and have a full session. Because safety, especially for people that have experienced trauma, is the intervention, right? So you make a really good point. And we're 40 minutes outside of the city. So our horses, right now we have 5 horses on 15 acres. So it's a pretty nice farm. We are very close to a Target though, which is quite nice. Yeah, we're really kind of in it. I would say it's like an agricultural area, but not like what you may think of when you think of like hundreds and hundreds of acres. It's not like that here. It's pretty densely populated, but it is, our farm here is quite nice. It's an adequate piece of land for the number of horses that we have, and they're living their best lives right now. I'll tell you. And we switched them to night turnout, so they're out all night and in all day because it's quite hot, starting to get quite hot. And I got up this morning at 6 and they were all flat out lying out in the grass, snoozing, snoring. I was like, look at you all, just living your best lives. So yeah, and there are a lot of horses actually in the city of Philadelphia. I don't know if any of you have watched Concrete Cowboy, that's on Netflix right now, but there's a very long history of the Black urban cowboy in Philadelphia, and there are horses in Fairmount Park through Work to Ride program. And so there's a long history of horses being in the city, which is very different experience than when I grew up and how I grew up with horses. And then, it calls into all sorts of our feelings about like how horses are cared for. But I have to say, for a lot of the programs that I've gone to see, the horses are quite happy and have adapted and are living in a really different way. Yeah, and I don't say that for every program, but it is interesting to see how adaptable even horses can be through really good care. Yeah. And it's not an elementary question. It's hard to conceptualize where you live and where I live, and especially if you're thinking of New York. But there are horses inside New York City that live inside New York City that take elevators up and down.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Not in my apartment building, that's for sure. I appreciate it though. Yeah, for me, I wasn't sure if the suburban environment would affect the horse and make them more nervous, but it sounds like that it's not what I'm thinking when I think of suburban. It's maybe a little bit more acreage.
Yeah, it's quite quiet here where we are. And I think that they have horses in more densely populated areas, but we're on a pretty quiet road. And that's the cool thing about horses, is they're so adaptable. Like, just like dogs, like you can work with them and train them. And if they trust you, they're going to trust you to get on a trailer and go into a prison, and they're going to know that they're okay because they have a repeated experience of being okay. And kind of can look to you when they're feeling uncertain. And that they, my horses know I'm not going to ever put them in a bad situation ever. I remember one time we got off, it's kind of a random story, but the prison occasionally every year allows deer hunting on the property. I'm not quite sure why. But we showed up and somebody had put a blind about 30 feet from our pasture fence. And I pitched a big fit and threw my horses back on the trailer and left. And I said, we're not coming back until the blind is down. They're like, but nobody's in the blind. I was like, well, how do you think it makes people feel who are, experiencing incarceration to see that blind sitting right next to where they're trying to create a therapeutic space, or, no, thank you.
It's great advocating for your animals and the people.
Yeah, like you guys were saying, it's a dual role, right? So yeah, no session today. You all explain it to the warden, not me.
Well, and thinking about animals in different environments too, that made me think on the canine side of things. One of the things that I found has been very helpful in training my own is exposure to different environments. And so going through obedience classes, I've got into the AKC. You can do different CGC levels. And one of them is a public access type level test where you put them on elevators, you go upstairs, you go out in public. And so it's really important for that different exposure, and probably similar with the horses, so that when they enter those environments, they understand what that experience is going to be like, and it conditions them to that. So if you're thinking about different animals, that's one of the ways where you can work with them is going through and exposing them to different environments and working on that relationship and bond, like Kristin was saying, so that they trust you and they know that you're going to protect them in that environment.
And initially, I'm sure, just like dogs, like my horses showed stress going to a new environment. Was it harmful to them? I don't think so. But they didn't have, they were allowed, were in a big space where they could move their bodies and, snort and run around and, be all keyed up, and that was completely acceptable. And the moment that they relaxed and were calm and spent 30 minutes being calm, they go right home. And they had that repeated experience of being on, keyed up and looking around. And then as soon as they're calm, they leave. So just reinforcing that calm means home, and so to the point where they just get there and they play. That's their experience now. This is fun. We're going to the mall kind of thing.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you taking time. I'm looking forward to our CE opportunity. That'll be a really good one too. Any last?